Welcome to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we equipped you to more effectively lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. Each week, we help you sharpen your leadership acumen by cracking open the playbooks of dynamic leaders who are doing big things in their professional endeavors. And now your host, leadership tactics and organizational development expert, Karen Farrell Rhodes.
Hello, superstars. This is Karen, and welcome to another episode of the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast. We have a fantastic guest on today's show, and I'm so pleased to welcome Ms. Heather Conklin. And Heather is the CEO of a company called Torch. And Torch is a very renowned leadership development and coaching platform. And before joining Torch, she spent 9 years at Salesforce, serving as a senior vice president and general manager of the Trailhead business, where she focused on skilling and enablement and helping individuals develop and grow within the Salesforce ecosystem. Now, that was a mouthful, but you all know we love to have seasoned leaders and experts in the leadership development space. And she's going to share both a little bit about her story and about what great things they are doing at Torch. So welcome to the podcast, Heather.
Thank you so much. I am really excited to have this chat today. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you as well. You have a really fun time. And as my listeners know, I'm a chatterbox myself. So I always try to, squeeze in as much information about our guests as possible, but I'm very curious about your journey and your thoughts on coaching and development today. But before we get started, we always love to learn just a tad about our guests. So for as much as you feel comfortable, can you give us a sneak peek into your life outside of work?
Absolutely. I think the thing that comes to mind quickly is the thing that people get very shocked to hear, that in addition to being a CEO, I also at home, I have 3 little girls. So I have an 8-year-old, an almost 6-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And so I always tell people that I'm not sure which part of my life is crazier, but certainly both are a lot right now. So young girls and obviously a lot going on at work every day, but it's super fun. I live outside of Boston with my 3 girls and my husband. I have a crazy dog, and I don't have a lot of free time because of both of those parts of my life. But it's very rewarding. And I feel like one of the things that's really interesting to me is all the parallels between parenting and leadership inside of a company. There are, people don't like to admit it, but there's a lot of parallels between those two worlds.
There are a ton. And as a recent empty nester, so there is light at the end of the tunnel. Let me just tell you that.
I can barely wrap my head around that. Yeah.
But enjoy the time. You have some great age ranges there, and enjoy it because you blink and they're adults. So just say congratulations on you and the girls, and also congratulations on balancing being a CEO of a very progressive company, because you're right, both are extremely tough and you have to manage your time wisely.
Yeah.
Well,
Definitely.
let's start out. If you can share just a high level of your career before Torch, and then we'll delve into your work now at Torch.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I was at Salesforce for 9 years prior to joining Torch. And my whole career, I've been in product management roles, actually. So, developing technology products for varieties of end users. And as part of my career at Salesforce, I got this really awesome opportunity at one point to start and lead our associate product manager program at Salesforce. And basically, the idea here was we were going to take people out of undergrad and teach them to be really great product managers at Salesforce. And so I got the opportunity to do that with Brett Taylor, who at that point he had just become our chief product officer. He went on to become the co-CEO at Salesforce, and now he's chairman at OpenAI and has a new startup that he's running. But at the time, I had gone to him and said, I thought there were a lot of ways that we could develop product managers differently at Salesforce. And he said he agreed. And so we started this program as a way to really develop new skills amongst product managers across the company. And I went into it thinking I'm just going to teach them how to be product managers, like all the hard skills. In the course of that time, I was in my own executive coaching experience at the time and having a really transformative personal experience with my coach, just really like seeing and thinking about myself really differently at work. And I started to realize that I could take some of the things that I was learning in my own coaching experience and bring that into these 22-year-olds who were just starting their career. And I always like to say that, teach them the good habits before they learn all the bad ones.
Right.
And just in doing that, I saw the transformative effect it had on them and how much it impacted, of course, their work life, but also had really broad reaches into their personal lives as well, and just helped them show up as a much more kind of confident and grounded person at work and be able to develop more meaningful relationships with the people around them. And at that point, I always say I got bit by the coaching bug and just became really fascinated by the kind of shift that coaching can get for people.
Yeah.
And so I just was like, I've got to do something with that passion. And I didn't really know what to do with it. I was thinking about becoming a coach. And again, not really sure, but I ultimately stumbled upon Torch one day as I was looking at things on LinkedIn, and I almost reached out to our founder and said, if you ever have a role for someone like me, let me know. And I didn't do it, but about 6 weeks later, a recruiting firm reached out to me about a confidential COO search. And so I took the call, interested in who this company was. And at the end, they said, it's this company called Torch. And I just had this whoa moment.
Wow.
I can't believe that that's the company that you're asking me about. So I always joke that I manifested this job for myself,
Yes.
but it really was the perfect intersection of all of the product experience that I have had in my career, and then this passion that I feel so strongly about with coaching and great leadership. And so I decided to take the leap and went over to Torch. I joined right as the economy was starting to go downhill in 2022. So it wasn't the best time to join, a small startup, but
Sure.
certainly has brought a lot of really interesting learning and challenges along the way. And I've learned a ton from that. So I spent a couple of years as the COO, running a lot of the operations and product areas of the business. And then I succeeded our founder this summer as the new CEO at Torch.
Oh, that is amazing. And what I found so interesting about your story, Heather, was that your CEO was very intentional about his succession planning and nurturing and mentoring and grooming you to eventually take over the CEO's spot. And a lot of our listeners don't get to hear about the good and bad, if there is any bad around that. So I'd love for you to share, what you can about, how did he approach you, and then how did that, mentoring and coaching, what was that experience like for the CEO
Yeah.
to work with you?
Cameron is his name, and he is a coach and a therapist, his background. And so when I started interviewing with Cameron, I immediately knew that I was interviewing with a very different profile of leader than I had ever worked for, certainly at Salesforce and elsewhere in my career. But one of our very first interviews was a 3-hour walk outside of San Francisco. And we walked and talked for a long time. And I knew going into that interview that there was no way to fully prepare for what I was going to go into. But in the course of that conversation, really very upfront, he asked me, would I ever be interested in being a successor for him as the CEO someday? So I say that because it was just on the table right from the start. Like I knew his ideas and, intentions around that. And it gave me time to think about it. I don't think I fully knew what I was saying when I said that, yes, I would definitely consider that. But because it was always there, we talked about it throughout my time working for him. And I always say sometimes it was at the forefront of our conversation, and other times it was sort of in the back of our minds as something that maybe would happen someday. But him and I have a really, really close relationship and very open and honest with each other, built a lot of trust in each other over the years. And so that in and of itself lended to a really, successful navigation of something that is really hard. Like this was this is his baby. He created it and brought it into the world and did an amazing job. And so to have to hand that off and deal with just the transfer of that thing that he means that means so much to him was really hard. And then it is a big identity for shift for him, going from being a CEO to now being the chairman on our board, but just a different day to day. So there was a lot to work through. And on my own side as well, I mentioned having little kids. It was really scary to think about taking on the job of being a CEO when I do have 3 little girls at home. And I was curious if I was going to be able to balance that and what that was going to look like. But again, because he's a coach and therapist, we got to have a lot of really honest conversations about it. So
Sure.
not everyone, is succeeding someone with that kind of background, but it did lend itself to a transparent and really honest kind of process that I think led us to a really good place.
That is awesome. That was the first thing that came to my mind. I was thinking, gosh, is it double duty or was your bandwidth, which was probably already stretched, was it tanking at that point? Because I'm sure when in these conversations, while you're doing your role, you also had to have an eye out for, the CEO side and responsibilities and learn and be strategic and think as a CEO before you had to be one. So I was just wondering how that affected your bandwidth, but it sounds like you all managed pretty well.
Yeah, I think because again, it was always on the table right from the start, and we got to enact it over a much longer period of time. I think often the mistake I think I see people make is that you only talk about succession when it's like it's time for me to leave now, or like I'm going to step down now. And that just doesn't give you a lot of time to do a successful transition and to build up that trust that things are going to be okay if you step away. And so with him and I, we got to work on it over 2 years. And so he was very, thoughtful and careful about, okay, I'm going to give you this piece and now I'm going to add, this other thing, or I'm going to transfer like the decision-making power to you on this, this aspect of the business. And so it was just done with a lot of intention and not like it's not a light switch. It was more of like a gradual change over time. So it didn't feel overwhelming in that way, but yeah, it definitely was interesting to watch him in the role leading up to the point when I take it over. Because again, I said at the start, I had said, yeah, like that sounds great. I would love to be, like your successor someday. But watching it all over time, it's a really hard job, and it is
Imagine.
a lonely and difficult job. And so I think to have the up close view of what it really could look like, it did make it a harder decision at the end when it was like, okay, we are going to make this change now. I did have to think really long and hard about it. And
Yeah.
it wasn't just like a slam dunk, like, yes, I'm definitely going to do it now. But I felt really supported through the process of even just exploring those kinds of questions and doubts and fears and all that kind of stuff.
Interesting. I would love to take a step back because I don't know if we really went in depth about yet what Torch really does. I know it's a coaching platform, but I would love for you to kind of inform our listeners about Torch and who's your target audience. And then so can you compare or can you tell us how you differentiate yourselves from, say, like, I mean, there's a lot of coaching platforms out there, but say like a Better Up out
Yep.
there.
Yeah, totally. So Torch is a leadership coaching platform. And what we do is we work with companies to bring professional coaches into their teams and match their employees with one of our awesome coaches. And so from that standpoint, it sounds a lot like all the other, coaching platforms. But what makes Torch different is a few specific things. So one is we only hire coaches who were formerly leaders themselves. So they have both a coaching certification as well as a professional career of their own, which means that they have walked in your shoes and they do understand what it is like to work in the kind of environment that you're working in. And that's really important because it creates a more, nuanced way of being able to coach someone. And there's a lot relatability and just trust in that because of the caliber of the careers and the coaching that these coaches are bringing to the table. So that's a big one. The other one is that we do what we call context coaching. So we coach people in the context of what's going on inside of the organization. And that means that we want to make sure that we're a really strong partner to our customers and saying, what is going on inside of your organization and what do you need from your leaders as you go forward. And then we're putting all of that in front of the coaches and having them work with the participants in coaching in very, again, clear ways that are going to help them be a successful leader at that organization. So it's not, traditional coaching in a sort of more isolated sense of we're going to go and have you're going to have an amazing experience with a coach and it's going to make you feel better, as an individual. Like that is certainly something I believe to be true. But because this is coaching within an organization, we do want to make sure that, the organization is also benefiting from it and that we are creating great leaders at that organization and delivering impact and outcomes for the business as well. So we really do anchor our coaching around the business. And then because our coaches have been leaders themselves in their own careers, they can be more of like an active guide for the leader as they go through the coaching experience.
I love that. And I'm not sure if you've, done these kind of analyses, but I'm just curious if your coaches have reported any trends that they're seeing right now as far as goals or struggles that leaders in general are really feeling these days.
Yeah, totally. I actually just put out an article, I think last week on LinkedIn about this, but I think that the thing we're observing across the board is just that work is really hard for people right now.
Yeah.
And it's kind of depressing, honestly. Just thinking about how much time we spend at work and how hard it is on everyone. And it seems to be all levels, all industries, and this level of just overwhelm and fear and reactivity to all of the things going on in the world today. It creates kind of what I've been calling a pressure cooker of all of that. And it doesn't put people on very good behavior when you're in that place of fear and
Yeah.
reactivity. And so, I hear all these stories about leaders behaving badly or like toxic cultures and, just too much to do, too little time. Like I can't even think about a different way of showing up because I'm so overwhelmed that I can't even make the space, to deal with all of that. And
Right.
so I think that's putting leaders into a place where I'm seeing them kind of continually make this false choice between, am I here to drive results for the business or am I here to take care of the people? And people put those two things opposite ends of a spectrum, and then they're kind of feeling like they have to choose one or the other. I'm either going to really take care of my people at the expense of results, or I'm going to really drive results, and that means I can't be, nice and supportive of the team because I need them to deliver the results. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about trying to change about all of that is just that leaders see that not as two opposing binary choices that they have to make, but actually that this is a spectrum, and that if you get the balance right, it can really feed into each other. Like the taking
Great
care of
point.
people drives more results, and that they're not at odds with one another. And I think by achieving a better balance between those, then we can create a more sustainable way of working that will really benefit everyone, both individually and at the organizational level.
Yeah, I love that. And, that's what we're seeing too. Now we're more on the strategic HR side of things like change management and realignments and things like that. But, a lot of leaders are really feeling the struggle. They were feeling it before, but then in this even more complex world of work and business, it's like doubling down on them. And we're seeing a lot of frustration and overwhelm, sometimes confusion when they're not understanding how to best navigate certain situations. And to your point, it doesn't put them in a very good mental or physical state when
Yeah.
they're struggling like that. And, you're kind of preaching to the choir to me about the value of coaching because I do know, but I just want to put a double emphasis and, high five around, what you all at Torch are doing because it's very, very important work and it does help bolster the leaders within an organization when they have that space and time and air cover to kind of figure out some things with a very trusted partner. And to your point, ones that have walked in their shoes, that can make a world of difference. And so I just want to commend what you all are doing there at Torch.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes a huge difference. That's why I feel so passionately about coaching is I always
Yeah,
say nothing has changed my leadership the way that coaching has, because it gave me that space and the step back and like a shift in my perspective and, help me question assumptions or address the fears and underlying like emotions of what it means to be a leader every day. And that makes you just be a lot more intentional as
absolutely.
person and how you show up with other people and how you engage with them from a again, like a more grounded place makes a huge.
Well, I can't let you leave here without, at least mentioning the buzzword of the current times, AI. And I'm just curious how AI is or is not impacting the world of leadership coaching.
It is having an enormous impact, I would say, on everybody. And again, like all jobs, all companies, we're all dealing with how do we incorporate AI into our work? How do we think completely differently about how people work? And that certainly touches how we develop leaders as well. And I think one of the big things there is that we have to rethink how we equip leaders to lead today, because we can't teach them the skills fast enough. And old playbooks like command and control, and the leader has all the answers and they're just going to tell everybody what to do. Like none of that works anymore
It sure
now.
doesn't.
And everything is just changing so quickly. Just in AI alone, the pace of that change is so rapid that we have to shift into a more empowered place of having our teams be a part of figuring out the future, and how do we bring out the collective genius of our teams and really support them on helping us to navigate these things, because the companies who wait for the leader to have all the answers or to figure it all out,
They're going to get left behind.
yeah, exactly. So it really is this, like, the impetus for change at every level is so high right now. And we're seeing people, going in the direction of like, okay, in coaching, for example, we see people bringing out AI coaches and, saying like maybe people will talk to AI as their coach, going forward. But at Torch, I always say we're team human here. Really
Yeah.
believe so much in the fact that one of the reasons that coaching is so powerful is because of the connection that you have with another human being. And
Yes.
AI can certainly support us a ton from just being a good augment to coaching, being
Yes.
something that, helps to make the most of the time that you do have with coaching. Certainly things around insights and
Or tools and resources you can point
yes,
them to. Yeah, but you can't
exactly.
trade a human.
Yeah.
I'm old school, so I love the human touch and
Me
interaction.
too, me too. I always say I'm like a world where everybody just talks to a bunch of AI bots, not humans, is not a world that I want to experience.
Me
It's really,
either. But I do appreciate the power of AI. I do appreciate how companies and leaders are thinking through, to your point, trying to be very strategic on how and where it makes sense to and include it into their business models. But there is something to be said about keeping the human touch and the human perspective there. You can use it to augment versus replace. And everybody I've talked to, we did last year a series where we featured chief technology officers from a lot of companies. And the red thread that everyone mentioned was that they didn't see, especially in the short term, AI replacing humans. It was more an augmented approach. But they said the tension around it was going to be, where do you draw the line?
yeah.
And that is not, there's no guidebook for this. So they're all having to figure it out to see what makes sense. And they think it's always going to be something they have to think about as well. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure
And
you
what we think about it today will be very different,
Yes.
than what we think about it a year from now too. But, it's like
Exactly.
we need people to learn the technology itself. We need to think about job displacement and things like that. And then we also, I think organizations need to think about the mindset shift that has to happen, at an individual level in order for people to do this. Like it takes being able to be comfortable in a lot of uncertainty and navigate a lot of complexity. It takes,
Yes.
being willing to take risks, being able to let go of control and let other people, be a part of creating the answer. And that's a lot of things that leaders have to unlearn from a lot of the behaviors that I think we've been taught, that those are the right behaviors, for a leader. So it's going to take a lot of unlearning and shifting of mindset, and just like the capacity for people to deal with all.
That sounds great. Without giving away any IP or anything like that, can you share maybe one thing that you're excited about that's coming up with Torch maybe in the next, I don't know, 1 to 2 years? I mean, where do you all see your best next steps being?
Yeah. The thing that I get most excited about is we've been calling this kind of a continuous learning loop, or like a two-way feedback loop from an organization and its leaders. And with that, organizations are asking a lot of their leaders and their people every single day. And it's easy to kind of push those things down on our employees and say, we need you to drive these results or show up in this way, the expectations that we have for people. And then, at Torch, we're in the center of that, trying to coach people to show up in those ways. But I always say that I could give you the best coaching in the entire world, but if the system that this leader is a part of is not conducive to them doing the kinds of things that you're asking them to do,
Right.
then they're never going to be successful. And it certainly isn't because of coaching or them. Like, the system around a leader matters so much. And so what we're really working on is creating a feedback loop back from the leaders to say, okay, I hear what you are asking me to do and the way you're asking me to show up, but like, hey, here are the challenges that I'm dealing with on the ground every day that are standing in the way of our like collective success as the organization. And that, I think, can be really, really powerful to helping the organization understand how to evolve and how do they help support the evolution, not just of one leader at a time, but the evolution of the org itself, and the system, because that's the only way for, I think, us to really see, meaningful change, is for the organization to understand how it also needs to evolve to create the kind of environment and results that it's really trying to create.
You know what I love about that? So yes, and it gives I see it could give great context and data points and talking points to the C-suite of what they need when they have to report to their boards, of what kind of support do they need, and able to create the type of environment that the leaders need to thrive.
Yeah.
And I think that it can generate some very rich conversations at, I would say, leaders at all levels, but specifically at the C-suite and board levels. It could really ignite a lot of great change, positive change that will help facilitate people doing their best work. I love that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yes, and completely.
Yes,
I love
and.
that.
All right, Miss Heather. Well, we can't let you leave here without asking you our signature question. My loyal listeners know about it, but we always ask our guests which of the 7 buckets that we write about that came out of our research on leadership execution really resonated with you. And you were so kind to share that executive presence really struck a chord with you. And for my newer listeners, the way we define executive presence, it's all about your ability to influence and lead others based on making very clear and convincing either oral or written presentations. It's all about having that grit along with data, facts, and things to compel others to follow your lead. So curious minds want to know, Ms. Heather, why does executive presence really resonate with you?
Yeah, I think about this in kind of the way we've always been told executive presence should look versus the way I think that it needs to continue to evolve and look going forward. So, I think we've been taught it's all about confidence and having all the answers and going in,
Not
with like this really
necessarily.
strong point of view that you're, like convincing everybody about,
Yeah.
versus where I see the most successful, leaders showing up. It's more from a more humble place, more like, I'm willing to admit what I don't know. I'm here to find the right answer with the group, and less that I personally have to have all the answers. Like, it takes being a great listener, a great observer of the situation and being able to really read the room. And a lot of that comes down to the more like emotional intelligence kind of skills. But I mostly want people to know that it doesn't need to look a very specific way, like coming at it from your own authentic place, being grounded in who you are and what you do and don't know
Yeah.
is actually like a much stronger way to show up with leaders and in exact situations. So that was why that one resonates a lot with me.
With you. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And we truly, unfortunately, we've run out of time, and we really appreciate your time on the episode today. But before I let you go, we'll have your bio and links to Torch and everything in our show notes. But I always love to give our guests a little bit of airtime to share where people can find you in the company. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, of course. That's an easy one. And then for Torch, our website is just torch.io. So easy to find. And you can read all about us there. You can get in touch if you'd want to talk more about how we could help, really transform leadership inside of your organization.
Sounds fantastic. Well, thank you again, Heather, for the gift of
So
your
much.
time. We appreciate you. And I know you're going to stay busy with those three little girls, but, but we do thank you for spending time with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was great to talk with you.
Yeah, same here. And thank you to listeners for the gift of your time, because as you know, there are literally millions of other podcasts that you could be listening to out there, and we do not take your patronage lightly. All that we ask is that you like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform of choice, and be sure to share our podcast with just one friend, because by doing so, we can all learn how to better lead at the top of our games. Thanks so much, and see you next week. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening to the Lead at the Top of Your Game podcast, where we help you lead your seat at any employer, business, or industry in which you choose to play. You can check out the show notes, additional episodes, bonus resources, and also submit guest recommendations on our website at leadyourgamepodcast.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn by searching for the name Karen Rhodes, with Karen being spelled Karan. And if you like the show, the greatest gift you can give would be to subscribe and leave a rating on your podcast platform of choice. This podcast has been a production of Shockingly Different Leadership, a global consultancy which helps organizations execute their people, talent development, and organizational effectiveness initiatives on an on-demand project or contract basis. Huge thanks to our production and editing team for a job well done. Goodbye for now.